The giant space station turned slowly against the stars, its metal arms reaching out like the spokes of a huge wheel. Inside the main hall, beings from across the galaxy sat in a perfect circle, each one different from the next. Some had scales that caught the light. Others had skin that seemed to glow, and a few looked like they were made of living metal. Commander Jake Morrison sat quietly in the human section, his uniform neat and his hands folded on the table in front of him. Next to him, Dr. Lisa Grant looked through her datapad, her face worried as she read the same numbers again and again. The hall was full of nervous energy as representatives whispered to each other in dozens of different languages. Zektar, the tall reptile from the Vorthan Empire, stood up first. His green scales moved as he breathed, and his yellow eyes looked at each face around the circle. "The reports are clear," he said, his voice deep and steady. "The Devourers have returned. In 6 months, they have destroyed 17 star systems, billions of lives lost, entire worlds turned to dust and metal." A sound like wind chimes came from the Etherian section, where a whisper of wind floated above her seat like a ghost made of light. When she spoke, her voice was like music. "Our people remember the old stories. The Devourers came before long ago. They ate worlds until there was nothing left. Then they went away. We thought they were gone forever." The Krillian general, a massive creature covered in thick armor, slammed his fist on the table. "Stories will not save us now. We need action. My fleets are ready to fight. Give us the coordinates and we will meet these machines in battle." Dr. Grant looked up from her datapad and caught Jake's eye. She had found something important in the attack patterns, but the political talk was moving too fast for her to speak. "Up." Jake nodded slightly, telling her to wait for the right moment. The synthoid delegate, more machine than living being, spoke in a voice like computer static. "Direct combat is inefficient. Analysis shows Devourer technology is superior to our current galactic standards. Recommendation: retreat to core worlds and establish defensive perimeters." This made the other species argue loudly. The Mindari representative, a pale being with large black eyes, tried to calm everyone down. "Perhaps we could try to communicate with them. My people have strong mental abilities. We could attempt contact." "Contact with machines that eat planets?" The Krillian general laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "They do not want to talk. They want to consume." For 2 hours, the arguing continued. Each species had their own idea about what to do, and each idea was shot down by the others. The Vorthans wanted careful planning and study. The Centaurians suggested hiding in space between the stars. The hegemony proposed sacrificing the outer worlds to save the inner ones. Finally, the council leader, an ancient being whose species was so old no one remembered their real name, turned to Jake. "And what does humanity propose, Commander Morrison?" Jake stood up slowly. He was not the biggest being in the room, not the strongest or the smartest looking. But when he spoke, his voice was calm and sure. "Humanity will handle evacuation efforts while the rest of you prepare your defenses." The room went quiet for a moment. Then several species began talking at once. The Krillian general laughed again. "Evacuation? Running away is your great plan?" "Someone needs to save the people who cannot save themselves," Jake said simply. "While you decide how to fight, millions will die waiting for rescue." Zektar's scales shifted color slightly, showing he was thinking hard. "This is a support role only. Humans would not be involved in the main battle." "We will do what we do best," Dr. Grant said, finally finding her chance to speak. "We adapt." The synthoid made a sound like electronic disagreement. "Human ships are not suitable for large-scale evacuation. Your technology is adequate, but not optimal for this task." Jake smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "You might be surprised what we can do when we have to." The council leader raised one thin hand for silence. "Very well. Humanity will coordinate refugee efforts. The Krillian fleets will prepare for direct engagement. The Vorthan Empire will handle strategic planning. The synthoids will fortify the core worlds. All other species will support these efforts as needed." As the meeting broke up, different groups gathered to make their plans. The Krillians talked about ship deployments and battle formations. The Vorthans spread out star maps and calculated supply lines. The Synthoids began discussing which worlds were worth defending and which should be abandoned. Dr. Grant walked with Jake toward the human transport dock. "They have no idea what they're dealing with," she said quietly. "The attack patterns show something they're all missing." "What do you see?" Jake asked. "The Devourers always hit the clean worlds first. New colonies, industrial planets, places that are organized and efficient. They avoid the messy places, the old worlds where different species live together. It's like they have trouble processing complexity." Jake stopped walking and looked at her. "Are you sure?" "The data is clear. Every world they've consumed so far was either single species or highly organized. They haven't touched any of the mixed colonies or the places where life is, well, complicated." "Interesting," Jake said. "Keep working on that. I have a feeling it's going to be important." Behind them, the other species continued their planning, each one focused on their own strengths and strategies. None of them noticed that the humans were asking different questions and looking at different problems. The Krillians planned for war, the Vorthans planned for defense, and the Synthoids planned for survival. But humans were planning for something else entirely. They were planning to make sure that when the crisis was over, there would still be a galaxy worth saving. And if Dr. Grant was right about the attack patterns, they might have found the key to not just surviving the Devourers, but stopping them completely. The station continued its slow turn against the stars, carrying the hopes and fears of 12 different species. But only one species was preparing to do what humans had always done best: find a way to turn disaster into opportunity and to make sure that no one got left behind. Captain Alex Chen stood on the bridge of the Endurance, watching the stars stream past as his ship jumped through hyperspace. The cargo vessel had been built to carry metal and grain between worlds, but now it carried something much more precious. In the converted cargo holds below, 3,000 refugees from 7 different species slept in bunks that had been welded together in the past week. The ship shook slightly as it dropped out of hyperspace near a small industrial world called Factory Prime. Alex looked at the planet through the main screen and shook his head. The Synthoids had built this place to be perfect. Every building was the same height, every street was straight, every factory ran exactly on schedule. It was clean and efficient and completely predictable. "Captain," his communications officer called out, "we're getting evacuation requests from the surface. The Devourers will be here in 18 hours. "How many people?" Alex asked. 40,000. Mostly Synthoids, but there are some human workers and a few other species. Alex did quick math in his head. His ship was already overcrowded, but cargo ships were built strong. They could probably fit another 1,000 people if they squeezed tight and shared air recyclers. "Tell them we can take 1,000. Send them the priority list." The priority list was something humans had created during the evacuation efforts. Children first, then medical cases, then essential workers, then anyone else who could fit. Other species thought it was strange that humans put children from any species ahead of adults from their own, but that was just how humans thought about things. Down in the cargo hold, engineer Kate Murphy crawled through a maintenance tunnel, checking the life support systems she had installed 3 days ago. The air recyclers were working overtime, processing oxygen for species that breathed different gas mixtures. The gravity generators were set to a compromise level that was not perfect for anyone, but acceptable to everyone. Kate had been working for 36 hours straight, and her hands were cut from sharp metal edges and quick welding jobs. But every system she built meant more people could be saved, so she kept working. She had learned to install Centaurian sleeping pods next to human bunks, and how to modify Etherian breathing apparatus to work with the ship's air supply. Her radio crackled, with a message from the surface. "Engineering team requesting permission to bring fabrication equipment aboard." Kate wiped sweat from her eyes and checked her tablet. The ship was already at maximum weight, but fabrication equipment meant they could make repairs and modifications during the flight. "Approved," she said. "Bay 7, secure it to the deck." On the planet's surface, colony leader Ben Rodriguez was making the hardest decisions of his life. Haven 3 was not like Factory Prime. It was a messy frontier world where humans had been mining and farming for 20 years. The town had grown without planning, with buildings added wherever they were needed. Human families lived next to Centaurian traders and Vorthon researchers. Ben stood in the town square, looking at the crowd of people who had come to hear about the evacuation. "The rescue ships will be here in 3 weeks," he said, his voice carrying across the square through speakers. "The Devourers will be here in 2 weeks." The crowd was quiet for a moment, then everyone started talking at once. A human miner named Gary spoke up first. "So what do we do?" "We survive," Ben said simply. "We make this place as hard to find and as difficult to process as possible. We go underground, we spread out, and we make ourselves a problem that the machines don't want to deal with." A Centaurian trader raised one of her forearms. "The evacuation ships cannot land if the surface is damaged." "Then we make sure the landing pad stays clear," Ben replied. "Everything else is negotiable." Back, in space, Admiral Patricia Wells sat in her command center on New Terra, coordinating the largest rescue operation in galactic history. Hundreds of ships were spread across the danger zone, each one modified to carry more people than it was designed for. Her staff worked around the clock, tracking ship positions and refugee numbers, and trying to stay ahead of the advancing Devourers. "Admiral," her aide called out, "the Krillian fleet is requesting escort support for their battle group." Patricia looked at the tactical display. The Krillians were positioning their ships for a direct confrontation with the Devourers, but they wanted human support ships to handle supplies and medical care. "Tell them we're busy," she said. "They can handle their own logistics." "Ma'am, they're threatening to withdraw protection from refugee ships if we don't comply." Patricia was quiet for a moment, then smiled coldly. "Inform the Krillian commander that if he withdraws protection from refugee ships, we will stop rescuing Krillian civilians from threatened worlds. See how that sounds to his government." Her aide looked surprised, but sent the message. 2 minutes later, the Krillians confirmed they would continue protecting refugee ships without conditions. Meanwhile, Dr. Lisa Grant worked in a converted laboratory aboard a refugee ship, studying the data that kept coming in from Devourer attacks. She had been right about the pattern. Clean, organized worlds were consumed quickly and completely, but messy worlds, places where different species had modified the environment in complex ways, seemed to slow the machines down. Dr. Roy Adams, a human scientist who had joined her research team, looked over her shoulder at the latest reports. "Look at this," he said, pointing to data from a mixed colony that had been attacked 3 days ago. The Devourers processed the industrial sector in 6 hours, but they spent 2 days working on the residential area where humans and Centaurians had built their homes together. "It's like they have trouble with complexity," Lisa said. "Pure, clean environments are easy for them to break down and convert. But when you mix different building styles, different technologies, different approaches to organizing space, they slow down." Roy nodded, then frowned. "But they still win in the end. They just take longer." "Time is what we need most right now," Lisa replied. "Every hour they spend confused is another hour for people to escape." On Factory Prime, the last evacuation, ships were loading passengers as fast as possible. Alex Chen watched through the cargo bay cameras as families said goodbye to everything they owned. Synthoid children who looked like small metal sculptures held hands with human kids as they walked up the loading ramps. Centaurian parents carried sleeping Etherian babies whose glow was dim with exhaustion. "Captain," his pilot called out, "long-range sensors are picking up Devourer scouts. We need to leave now." "Load for 10 more minutes," Alex said. "Every person counts." "Sir, if we wait too long, we might not be able to jump to hyperspace before they arrive." Alex watched a human family running across the landing pad, carrying an injured Vorthon on a stretcher between them. 8 more minutes, he said. Down on Haven 3, Ben Rodriguez was implementing Protocol Omega. The mining equipment was being converted into digging machines that could create underground shelters. The farms were being moved into cave systems that connected to the natural water table. The power generators were being buried and shielded. Most importantly, the people were working together in ways that surprised even Ben. Human engineers shared their knowledge with Centaurian builders. Fortin scientists worked with human farmers to create underground growing systems. Everyone was contributing what they knew, and the result was becoming something that no single species could have built alone. As the Endurance jumped back into hyperspace with its load of refugees, Alex Chen realized that something important was happening. Humans were not just rescuing people. They were bringing different species together and showing them how to work as a team. Every ship was becoming a small community where beings learned to live and work together despite their differences. And maybe, just maybe, that was going to be the key to surviving what was coming. Ben Rodriguez stood in the underground command center that had once been a storage cave for mining equipment. The walls were rough stone, and cables ran everywhere like electronic vines. Above them, the surface of Haven 3 was under attack by the Devourers, but down here 3,000 people from 6 different species were still alive. "How long can we hold out?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the human doctor who was treating injured people in the medical cave next door. Ben looked at the displays, showing power levels, air quality, and food supplies. 2 more days, maybe 3 if we ration everything." "The rescue ships are still 4 days away," said Cathara, the old Centaurian trader who had become the unofficial leader of the non-human refugees. Her 4 arms moved nervously as she spoke. "Can we stretch it to 4 days?" "We'll find a way," Ben said, because that was what humans did. They found ways. Above ground, the Devourers worked slowly through the town. The machines were massive, the size of buildings, and they moved with mechanical precision as they broke down everything they found. But something was wrong with their usual efficiency. Instead of processing the entire settlement in a few hours, they had been working for 2 days and were still not finished. The problem was that Haven 3 was not built like other colonies. Human miners had put buildings wherever they found good rock. Centaurian traders had added loading docks that followed their own ideas about efficient cargo movement. Vorthon researchers had built laboratories that connected to the human buildings in strange ways. 20 years of different species working together had created a town that made no sense from an engineering standpoint, but somehow worked perfectly for the people who lived there. The Devourers were programmed to process organized structures efficiently, but Haven 3 was not organized. It was organic, complex, and full of modifications that no single species would have thought of. Every building was different, every system was customized, and every solution to a problem had been created by people working together rather than following a standard design. In space above the planet, pilot Sam Parker led his squadron of modified fighters through the debris field left by the Devourer attack. His ship was small and fast, built for atmospheric flight but modified with better engines and shielding. It was not supposed to work in space combat, but humans had a talent for making things work when they were not supposed to. "Red leader to Red Squadron," Sam said into his radio. "I'm reading life signs in Sector 7, 3 ships, small transport class." "Copy, Red leader," came the reply from his wingman, Katie Lopez. "Moving to intercept." The 3 transport ships were Etherian, their hulls glowing faintly even though their engines were dead. The Devourers had damaged them, but not destroyed them completely. Probably because Etherian technology was so different from standard galactic designs that the machines had trouble figuring out how to process it efficiently. Sam's squadron moved, in carefully using magnetic grapples to connect to the damaged ships. Inside, they found 47 Etherian refugees, including 12 children, whose light was so dim they were almost invisible. "We can fit them in our cargo pods," Katie said over the radio. "But it's going to be a tight squeeze." "Make it work," Sam replied. That was the human approach to most problems. Make it work, even if it was not perfect, even if it was not supposed to be possible. Back on the research ship Newton, Dr. Lisa Grant and Dr. Roy Adams were finally starting to understand what they were dealing with. The data from dozens of attacks showed the same pattern every time. The Devourers were incredibly efficient at processing pure, clean, organized environments, but they slowed down dramatically when they encountered complexity, especially the kind of complexity that came from different species working together. "It's not just that they're slower with mixed environments," Lisa said, pointing to the latest data. "They're actually making mistakes. Look at this report from the Meridian colony. The Devourers left 3 buildings completely untouched, not because they couldn't process them, but because their scanning systems couldn't categorize them properly. Roy nodded, understanding dawning on his face. The buildings were hybrid constructions: human foundation, Centaurian superstructure, Vorthan electronics, and Etherian power systems. The machines couldn't figure out what they were supposed to do with them. Exactly, Lisa said. And look at this. Haven 3 has been under attack for 2 days, and the Devourers still haven't finished processing the surface structures. Every report shows them stopping, scanning, recalibrating, and starting over. On Haven 3, the proof of Lisa's theory was playing out in real time. Ben Rodriguez got reports every few hours from surface scouts who watched the Devourers through hidden cameras. The machines would approach a building, scan it with various sensors, then stand motionless for long periods as if trying to decide what to do. The worst confusion came when they reached the community center, a building that had been modified so many times by so many different species that no one could remember what it had originally been designed for. The Devourers spent 6 hours scanning it before finally giving up and moving on to an easier target. "They're machines," explained Kothara during a planning meeting in the underground shelter. "Machines follow programs, and programs need predictable inputs. What we have created here is not predictable." A human engineer named Tom Bradley nodded agreement. "Every system in this town is a custom job. Nothing is standard, nothing follows normal patterns. We've been making it up as we go along for 20 years. And that's driving them crazy," added Dr. Kim. "They can't process what they can't understand." Meanwhile, Elder Kothara was learning something important about humans. She had lived for over 200 years and dealt with many species, but she had never really understood how humans approached problems. Now, trapped underground with limited supplies and time running out, she was watching them work. When the water recycling system failed, the humans did not panic or try to find replacement parts. Instead, they took pieces from other systems and built something new that worked better than the original. When food supplies ran low, they did not ration carefully like other species would. They found new ways to grow food using equipment that was not designed for farming. Most importantly, they did not try to solve problems by themselves. Every solution involved bringing together people from different species and combining their knowledge in new ways. A human would have an idea, a Centaurian would suggest an improvement, a Vorthon would work out the technical details, and an Etherian would provide power in ways that the original designers had never intended. "You people are impossible," Kothara told Ben during one of their strategy meetings. "Thank you," Ben replied, smiling. "We try to be." Above them, Sam Parker's squadron was finishing another rescue mission, this time extracting a mixed group of survivors from a half-destroyed orbital station. The station had been home to researchers from 4 different species, and the Devourers had spent almost a full day trying to process it, before finally giving up and leaving it partially intact. "Red leader to base," Sam reported as his fighters headed back to the human fleet. "Package recovered. 38 souls, mixed species. The Devourers left about 40% of the station untouched." "Copy, Red Leader," came the reply from Admiral Wells. "Any idea why they didn't finish the job?" Sam looked back at the station, which was a maze of different architectural styles and technologies all connected together in ways that probably violated every safety regulation in the galaxy. "I think they got confused, Admiral. This place is such a mess that even I can't figure out how it's supposed to work." Admiral Wells smiled as she listened to the report. Confusion was good. Confusion meant delay, and delay meant more time to rescue people. But more than that, confusion meant that humanity's greatest strength, their ability to create complex communities out of diverse groups, might actually be the weapon they needed to fight back. The Devourers were machines designed to process order and efficiency, but humans specialized in chaos and cooperation. And for the first time since the crisis began, it looked like chaos might be winning. Dr. Lisa Grant stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, her datapad in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. She had not slept in 36 hours, but her eyes were bright with excitement. Behind her, a large screen showed attack patterns, processing times, and efficiency ratings that told a story no one had expected. The Devourers are not unstoppable, she said to the assembled representatives. "They have a critical weakness, and we've been accidentally exploiting it for weeks." Commander Jake Morrison sat in the front row, watching the faces of the other species as Lisa presented her findings. The Krillian general looked skeptical. The Synthoid delegate processed the data with mechanical precision. Zektar, the Vorthon counselor, leaned forward with interest. "The machines are programmed for efficiency," Lisa continued. "They can rapidly process clean, organized, predictable environments. Single-species colonies, industrial worlds, anything built to standard specifications. But they slow down dramatically when they encounter complexity." She pressed a button and the screen showed processing times from different worlds. Factory Prime, a pure Synthoid industrial world, consumed in 4 hours. New Geneva, a human agricultural world, 6 hours. But Haven 3, our mixed frontier colony, has been under attack for 4 days and is still not fully processed. The Etherian representative, Whisper of Wind, made her musical sound of question. "What creates this complexity that confuses the machines?" "Mixed communities," Jake said, standing up to join Lisa. "Places where different species live and work together, where they modify each other's technologies, where they solve problems by combining different approaches. The Devourers can't efficiently categorize what they find, so they slow down trying to figure out how to process it." The Krillian general slammed his fist on the table. "So your solution is to make our worlds messier? This is not a military strategy." "It's better than a military strategy," Lisa replied. "It's a survival strategy that actually works, and we have proof." She showed them footage from Haven 3, where the Devourers had spent 2 days trying to process a community center before giving up and moving on. Then she showed data from 12 other mixed colonies that had survived much longer than predicted. "The pattern is clear," Dr. Roy Adams said, joining the presentation from his position at the research station. "Pure environments are vulnerable. Complex mixed environments are resistant, and the more complex, the more resistant." Zektar's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue-green color. "You are proposing that we deliberately create chaos in our organized worlds?" "We're proposing that we create communities," Jake said. "Real communities where different species work together, not just trade with each other. Places where a human engineer and a Centaurian builder and a Vorthon scientist solve problems together and create something none of them could build alone." The council leader raised a thin hand for attention. "This is a radical proposal. You ask us to abandon the efficiency that has made our civilization successful." "We're asking you to survive," Lisa said simply. "Efficiency makes you vulnerable to the Devourers. Complexity makes you resistant." Tech specialist Mike Taylor was already putting the plan into action before the council finished debating it. His teams were spread across 6 star systems, working with local populations to implement what they were calling contamination protocol. But it was not really contamination. It was community building on a massive scale. On the industrial world of Gear 7, Mike's team was helping Synthoid factory workers redesign their production lines to include input from human creativity and Centaurian intuition. Instead of building identical products efficiently, they were building custom solutions that solved problems in unexpected ways. "The idea is to make everything just a little bit different," Mike explained to the Synthoid supervisor. "Instead of producing 1,000 identical widgets, produce 1,000 widgets that are all slightly different, each one customized for a specific use." The supervisor's optical sensors flickered with confusion. "This reduces efficiency by 17%. "But it increases survival by 100%, Mike replied. "The Devourers don't know how to process custom solutions. They're designed for mass production, not artisan craftsmanship." At the same time, General Carlos Vega was preparing the fleet action at Terminus Gate, the critical hyperspace junction that controlled access to the core worlds. But this was not going to be a normal battle. The human fleet was not trying to destroy the Devourers. They were trying to confuse them. "Remember," Carlos said to his ship captains during the final briefing, "we're not here to win a fight. We're here to buy time and create chaos. Every ship should be different. Every tactic should be unexpected. And every formation should look like organized confusion." The human ships were perfect for this kind of mission. No two were exactly alike because humans had a habit of modifying everything they built. Some ships had been converted from cargo haulers, others were modified passenger liners, and a few were experimental designs that had never been mass-produced. The fleet looked like a collection of spare parts flying in loose formation. When the Devourers arrived at Terminus Gate, they found exactly the kind of target that gave them the most trouble. The human fleet was not arranged in standard battle formation. Instead, they were scattered in what looked like random positions, but which actually formed a complex, three-dimensional maze, designed to channel the Devourers into areas where they would be most confused. The first Devourer ship, a massive construct the size of a small moon, approached the human fleet and began scanning. For 10 minutes, it sat motionless as its systems tried to categorize what they were seeing. Finally, it began to move toward what looked like the biggest threat, a converted cargo ship that was broadcasting signals on 17 different frequencies. But as soon as it moved, the human ships rearranged themselves. The cargo ship dropped back while 3 smaller vessels moved forward, each one using different technologies and tactics. The Devourer stopped again, recalculating its approach. "It's working," reported Captain Nicole Brown from her position in the modified passenger liner Dreams of Earth. "They're spending more time analyzing than attacking." "Keep them guessing," Carlos replied from his command ship. "Every time they figure out one pattern, change to a different one." Back on the contaminated worlds, the results were becoming clear. Mixed communities that had been deliberately made more complex were showing remarkable resistance to Devourer attacks. The machines would arrive, begin their usual scanning and processing routines, then slow down as they encountered systems and structures that did not fit their programming. On New Harmony, a world where humans and Centaurians had been working together for 30 years, the Devourers spent 3 days trying to process the capital city before giving up and moving on to an easier target. The city was a maze of human buildings connected by Centaurian bridges, with Vorthon electronics and Etherian power systems, all integrated in ways that had evolved organically over decades of cooperation. "They can't break down what they can't understand," reported the local human administrator Jerry Wang. "And they can't understand something that was built by 4 different species working together without a master plan." The breakthrough came when Dr. Grant realized that the contamination protocol was not just slowing down the Devourers, it was actually causing them to malfunction. On worlds where complexity reached a certain threshold, the machines began to shut down completely, overwhelmed by input they could not process. "It's like a computer virus," she explained to Jake during a hurried conference call. "But instead of attacking their software, we're attacking their basic assumptions about how reality should be organized." Jake smiled as he watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. Human teams were working with local populations to create the kind of beautiful chaos that humans had always excelled at. Mixed communities, hybrid technologies, and cooperative solutions that no single species would have thought of. The Devourers had been designed to consume a galaxy of efficient, organized civilizations. But humanity was teaching the galaxy to be inefficient, disorganized, and wonderfully, chaotically alive. And for machines that depended on predictability, that was proving to be an impossible problem to solve. 6 months after the last Devourer ship shut down in the Outer Rim, Commander Jake Morrison walked through what had once been a refugee camp on the world of Second Chance. Now it was a thriving town where humans lived next to Centaurians, where Vorthan children played with Etherian younglings, and where the main street was lined with shops that sold everything from human coffee to synthoid precision tools. The town made no sense from an urban planning perspective. Buildings were different heights and used different architectural styles. The power grid was a mixture of 6 different technologies that should not have worked together, but somehow did. The transportation system included human ground cars, Centaurian, walking paths, and Etherian floating platforms all sharing the same routes. "It's beautiful," said Dr. Lisa Grant, joining Jake as he watched the organized chaos of daily life in the mixed community. "Messy, complicated, and absolutely beautiful." Jake nodded, remembering the perfectly organized cities he'd seen before the crisis. They had been efficient and clean and completely vulnerable to machines that valued efficiency above all else. This place was the opposite. It was inefficient, unpredictable, and completely alive. Ben Rodriguez approached them from the direction of the community center, which had grown from a simple meeting hall into a sprawling complex that seemed to add new sections every month. "The council wants to make this official," he said, holding up a formal-looking document. "They want to designate Second Chance as the capital of the new multi-species cooperative zone." "That's a terrible name," Lisa said, laughing. "It sounds like a business contract. How about just calling it home?" suggested a young voice behind them. They turned to see Zara Kim, who had been 8 years old when her family was evacuated from Factory Prime during the crisis. Now she was 14 and spoke 7 different languages fluently. She considered herself equally comfortable with humans, Centaurians, Vorthons, and Etherians, and she was not unusual among the children who had grown up in the mixed communities. "Homeworks," Jake said, smiling at the girl who represented everything they had accomplished. "But I think the council needs something more official for their records." "The Galactic Institute for Adaptive Survival sounds better anyway," Lisa said. "That's what they're really creating here. A place to teach the galaxy how to survive by working together." The Institute had grown from Lisa's original research into devourer weaknesses into something much larger. Species from across the galaxy sent representatives to learn the human arts of improvisation, cooperation, and creative problem-solving. What had started as a crisis response had become a new way of thinking about how civilizations could develop. Elder Kothara, now over 220 years old, had become one of the Institute's most popular teachers. She specialized in helping other species understand the human approach to diversity. "Humans do not try to eliminate differences," she would tell her students. "They collect differences and use them to build strength." The old Centaurian had watched her own people change during the crisis. Before the Devourers, Centaurians had been traders who worked with other species but kept their own cultures separate and pure. Now young Centaurians like her grandniece were learning human engineering techniques and Vorthon scientific methods and creating hybrid solutions that were better than anything either species could have developed alone. The same changes were happening everywhere. Synthoid factories now employed mixed teams that created custom products instead of identical units. Etherian artists collaborated with human musicians to create new forms of beauty that neither species had imagined before. Vorthon scientists worked with Centaurian traders and human engineers to solve practical problems in ways that academic research alone could never have achieved. "We call it the network," explained Dr. Roy Adams to a group of visiting delegates from the Outer Rim. "It's not really a government or an organization. It's more like a way of thinking that connects communities across the galaxy." The network had grown from the communication systems used during the refugee crisis. What had started as a way to coordinate rescue efforts had evolved into a galaxy-wide system for sharing knowledge, resources, and solutions. When a community on one world faced a problem, they could reach out to the network and find other communities that had faced similar challenges. But more than that, the network had become a way for different species to stay connected across vast distances. A human family on New Geneva might have regular conversations with their Centaurian neighbors who had moved to the Vorthon system. Etherian artists on the core worlds collaborated with synthoid engineers in the industrial zone to create projects that spanned light years. Admiral Patricia Wells, now retired from military service, had become the coordinator of network logistics. "It's the most inefficient communication system in galactic history," she would tell visitors with obvious pride. "Messages get passed through 6 different species before reaching their destination, translated into 4 different languages, and modified by each group that handles them. A simple hello can become a cultural exchange program by the time it arrives." The inefficiency was the point. The old galactic communication systems had been fast and direct and completely predictable. The network was slow and indirect and constantly changing, which made it impossible for any centralized system to control or predict. It was the perfect communication system for a galaxy that had learned to value chaos over order. The real test of the new approach came when scouts reported finding devourer ruins in the deep dark, the empty space between galaxies. The machines had not been destroyed by military action. They had simply shut down when they encountered too much complexity to process. Their programming had been designed for a universe of efficient, predictable civilizations, and they could not adapt to a galaxy full of communities that refused to be categorized. They were perfect predators, Dr. Grant explained during her lecture at the Institute. But they were designed to hunt a specific type of prey. When that prey evolved into something more complex, the predators became extinct. Jake Morrison, now serving as the human representative to the reformed Galactic Council, often thought about the irony of their success. Humanity had saved the galaxy not by being stronger or smarter than other species, but by teaching them to be more like humans, more chaotic, more cooperative, more willing to try things that should not work but somehow did. The new council meetings were nothing like the formal sessions of the old government. Representatives sat in mixed groups instead of species sections. Debates were conducted in multiple languages simultaneously, with real-time translation that often produced beautiful confusion. Decisions were made through a process that looked like organized chaos but somehow produced results that everyone could live with. Why humanity always survives, Zara Kim said during a school presentation about galactic history. She was explaining the crisis to a mixed class of children from 8 different species, all of whom had been born after the Devourers were defeated. It's not because humans are the strongest or the smartest. It's because humans know how to make friends with anyone and turn disasters into opportunities. One of her classmates, a young synthoid named Unit 47 who had chosen the nickname Lucky, raised his hand. But now everyone does that, not just humans. Zara smiled, the same smile that Jake Morrison had worn when he first realized that their real victory was not defeating the Devourers but transforming the galaxy itself. That's the point, she said. Humans survive by teaching everyone else how to survive too. Outside the classroom window, the city of Second Chance continued its daily life of beautiful, chaotic cooperation. Different species worked together, on projects that made no sense but somehow worked perfectly. Children played games that mixed the rules from 6 different cultures. Artists created beauty that could only exist when multiple ways of seeing the world came together. The galaxy was messier now, more complicated and harder to predict. It was also stronger, more resilient, and more alive than it had ever been before. And in the end, that was why humanity always survived. Not because they were the best at any one thing, but because they were the best at bringing out the best in everyone else.